Welcome to More Than a Lawyer, the podcast where we're rewriting the rules of success, one inspiring story at a time. I'm your host, London, and as the saying goes, I'm more than a lawyer. I'm doing more than one thing, navigating modern careers, passions, and dreams. So whether you're a career shifter, a seasoned professional looking for that second act, or a dream chaser, join me as I dive deep into conversations with trailblazers, crafting their own narrative, embracing multiple roles, and thriving in the pursuit of their passions. Buckle up for a journey filled with insights, wisdom, and a whole lot of inspiration. Get ready to shatter expectations and ignite your ambition. Welcome to More Than a Lawyer. All right, folks, I'm so excited to dive in with our amazing guest today. I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce her. She's not only a lawyer, she's an Emmy Award-winning poet, writer, actor, and activist. And what's really interesting is that I read that you've been doing this for more than 17 years. Talk about committed to her craft. She's truly an all-around badass. So without further ado, let's give it up for the incredible Suzen Baraka. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the time. I'm like, this is crazy. How are you doing all these things? I just reading it, I got exhausted. But so I read that you've co-starred in the other two, which is on HBO Max,
yes,
and also Blue Bloods,
yes,
on CBS. Can you talk about what inspired you to make that leap from law to a career in the arts? Because they're both their own individual grind. And I'm like, how do you, both sides of your brain, like, how do you do that?
I don't know that it was inspiration so much as destiny. I always said, since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a lawyer, a teacher, and an actor.
I love that.
And I spent several years, probably about 7 to 10 years, teaching on and off in different capacities with nonprofit organizations as artists in residence at a couple different institutions, and with a nonprofit called NJ Leap. And separately, I got my law degree, but I had been pursuing, pursuing it feels like the wrong word sometimes, but I became a spoken word artist professionally, touring and competing in slams nationally in high school and college.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, in some ways, I kind of already was pursuing an artistic career.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just something that if I had the time to do it, I said yes. And my attitude as a young person was always like, as long as it's not, sex or drugs, the answer is going to be yes, right? Like, if I can do it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that mentality probably came from my mother, who is not originally from this country. And so it's like, whatever opportunities you have, you're grateful for them, you take advantage of them, and you do them to the best of your ability, right?
I love that.
It's like the immigrant, ethos.
Yes.
So, and so I, was teaching every opportunity I was offered to do that in a way that was sort of congruent with my lifestyle at the time. So I've taught poetry, I've taught creative writing, I've taught college prep, I've taught constitutional law debate, I've taught college prep, I've taught a number of different types of things, right, to students from, I want to say, from 3rd grade through high school.
Wow.
Through 12th grade. And I did this all throughout high school and college and law school. And at the same time, I was touring and competing in poetry and spoken word.
Oh my gosh.
And once I graduated law school, I said, okay, now, I took the bar exam in New York and New Jersey. I passed.
Wow.
And I said, this is my job now. Now I'm a lawyer.
Right.
And I practiced law. I did entertainment law and then transitioned into investment banking at Barclays, doing regulatory work. And honestly, even though I still sort of maintained an entertainment law practice during that time, it wasn't fulfilling all of my needs because I had been living such a multifaceted life.
Right.
And so I had started thinking about going to grad school to get my MFA in acting.
Oh my goodness.
And I told myself, I said, self, I'm going to quit my job in August and I'm going to go to grad school in September. And I'm only going to apply to like 3 schools, which were like NYU, Columbia, and Yale.
The best ones.
Because I had just sort of fallen back in love with theater. And I was in a very tumultuous marriage at the time. And so my escape was like going to play readings, specifically at this one theater called the Atlantic Theater Company, which had this thing called the Mix Fest, which celebrated like playwrights of color. And so and they were free. So I would just go like after work or on weekends by myself and just listen to these actors read these new works by these burgeoning playwrights. And I was so inspired. I was like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Like fully do it. And then of course August rolled around. I had just purchased a house that January in Brooklyn. And this is turning out to be a much longer answer than you asked.
No, I love that. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're giving me so much to work with.
But of course, August rolls around and I just purchased a house and I was in the process of renovating because it was a 3-family house. So I was, and I had also separated from my husband at that time. And I was like, well, I'll wait another year.
Wow.
And my boss and I at the time hated each other. She was a new boss. I had a different boss previously. And she had been trying to figure out how to get rid of me from the day she started.
Oh my gosh.
Politics.
Ugh.
I was the only woman of color in my aside from our amazing and incredible assistant, but I was the only woman of color. I was a VP in my department.
Oh my gosh.
And from the day I started, she had multiple people tracking when I would come and go, even though I'm not, I'm not on the clock. I'm a salaried employee.
Right.
And so I knew from then, like, okay. And so she like lied to HR and basically got me fired. But it was like the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yes.
Because it forced me to like have a real conversation with God. Like, what am I going to do? Because I told myself August. And sure enough, in August, God was like, nah, you said it.
You said, so we're going to make it happen.
You said it, right?
Oh my God.
So here I am, August. And I'm like, oh.
Wow.
And I had gotten a call back for NYU, but I didn't get in. And so I was like, well, I don't know where I'm going to go. And Atlantic Theater Company had a conservatory program. I had already been spending so much time going to their readings. So I applied. I got in and I got a scholarship.
Oh my gosh. Talk about lemons to lemonade. What? I think I would have just mourned like the firing for a minute and then I would have been like, okay, I need to report her. Like, I don't know. I love that you didn't
all of those things happened though.
Wow.
I wanted to sue.
Yes.
I thought about it, for discrimination. I had every reason to, and I had multiple experiences that were incredibly racist, but I just didn't. And because I was going through so much already. I was going through the divorce. I was going through the renovation. I had a really bad experience. My contractor ran off with all of my savings.
No, that's my fear.
Yeah, and so it was a very hard time. Like I had a place to live, but I didn't know how I was going to pay the mortgage. I didn't know how. Most days I didn't eat. I was jumping the turnstile just to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. And this is all in New York?
This is all in New York, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And New York, I lived there for 6 years, man. That place is a grind. Like I had to come back to LA. I was like, okay, I cannot stay here. The winters are brutal. Like they're like 8 months long and
they are.
I mean, but it sounds like the best place to teach you to kind of like be adaptable, be flexible, and just get things done. Because you sound like a doer. Like you're just like, nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to just make something happen. Yeah. And maybe, like you said, that's from your mother's like resilience, the immigrant spirit. Is just like, I'm going to get from point A to point B, like regardless.
Absolutely.
I love that. Oh my God. And mine are like bomb you dropped. You went from lawyer to investment banking. Mm-hmm. That's even a transition. I'm like, what? I can't even imagine.
Well, it's regulatory work. So, right. Okay. So, like, my job was literally to explain to the regulators how we would resolve our bank in a safe way if a Lehman type crisis were to occur. Because if you remember, Barclays purchased Lehman minus certain, assets. But and so, particularly our branch of Barclays was under particular scrutiny from the regulators. And so my job was storytelling. Right. Like, how would we unwind this huge portfolio in a way that would make sure that we do not put U.S. financial stability in a crisis. And so, in some ways, storytelling.
Yeah, I feel like that's the theme of your life, storytelling. Yeah. So when you mention all of these roles, it seems like they're all somewhat connected in a way. So can you tell me a little bit how your legal background influences your work as an activist and artist? Because it seems like there is that common thread of the storytelling aspect. And what other parallels would you say are within them?
I think I became a lawyer because I felt like it was the safe route. And also because, again, when you grow up, it's like, even though I said I wanted to be a teacher and an actor as well, my mother was like, oh, so you're going to be a lawyer.
Exactly.
But the great thing about being a lawyer is you learn how to analyze problems and develop solutions. And a lot of that, again, is done through storytelling, right? Yeah. And the thing about acting is that you're your own business.
That's true.
And so the one thing I know for sure is that I know how to run the business of me. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not always great at it. Yeah. I'm not always graceful at it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the business is progressing. It has ups and downs. It is not a straight line at all whatsoever.
Right.
And I have setbacks all of the time. Of course, this is a very tumultuous industry. As we know, we just came out of a strike, which I like to call the actors' pandemic.
Right.
And but at the same time, it's like I'm my own business, and I learned a lot of how to manage this business just through the analytical skills I developed in law school. It's all about, that's what they teach you in law school. I mean, you can learn laws, you can memorize all you want, but the real tool is, what is the problem? How do we solve it?
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that, because I'm just curious, when you talk about balancing all these roles, what are the tools that you use to, like, keep you focused, keep you organized? Because I can only imagine, like, just listening, I'm just like, how did she do this? I'm just still like, each day, how did she do this? And keep and actually do it well. Like, you're Emmy Award-winning. Like, that's insane. Like, you could just, yes, you can be a poet. That's great. You could be an actor. That's great. An activist. That's great. But to do it well and be a lawyer, to do it well, that's the hard part, I think.
Well, the Emmys I got for work that it kind of all snowballed. Let's just start there. And I had help.
Okay.
This was not just me. And I wanted, so back in 2019, 2020, we had an election, right?
Yeah.
And things were very much in
disarray.
That's a word.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah.
And I was commissioned by a group called Poetic People Power to write a poem about voting. And at the time, I was just like going through my own stuff, like all of the things I just mentioned, that was all happening at this time, a lot of that.
Yeah.
At this point, I had already started school.
Okay.
But try learning acting via Zoom.
I can't.
Which is what I had to do, because after 1.5 semesters, that's where we landed, right? So I was commissioned to write this poem about voting. I kept talking to my friends and saying, how am I supposed to write a poem about voting?
Right.
And all this stuff is going down. We got George Floyd. We got women's rights being taken away. And on top of that, I'm a mess.
Yeah.
And And that question ended up becoming the through line for the poem that I wrote. And that poem ended up being so powerful that a friend of mine, my best friend, in fact, Jami Rambaran, who is a tenured professor, probably one of the youngest tenured professors at Howard.
Oh, shout outs to him.
Shout out to Howard. Oh, it's a she.
Oh, shout outs to her.
Yes.
Love that.
She wanted to direct a piece on it. So I was like, great, let's do it. So I went out to DC. She shot a video for this piece. The video ran as a PSA in DC for the 2020 election. And then that's what ended up winning the Emmy. When I tell you, I did not know and understand that world. I really didn't. Jami is really the person who was responsible for that first Emmy, because I was like, wait, what?
Yes, best friend. Yes. What? I love that.
But you need people in your circle who have strengths that you don't.
Yeah, 100%.
You know? And that's what I have. Like, I have such a beautiful, brilliant team supporting me. And I'm so grateful for them. They are scrappy, they are resourceful, and they are supportive.
That's huge.
And that is, like, honestly the most crucial tool to managing all of this. I am not an organized person. Right. But I have my real estate guru, Dio Neblet in New York, who, like, manages a lot of my life.
Yes.
And I have Jami, who is like she's my creative, partner in crime.
Right.
And I have my, she's my best friend, but she's also my mentor, Lynn Gonzalez, who is an incredible attorney and honestly is one of the best mentors ever. She actually is the one who convinced me to buy my house in Brooklyn, and also is the person who introduced me to my ex-husband.
Stop.
And quite honestly, those two things, like,
pivotal.
Were super pivotal, in a lot of my journey and my story and my growth.
Right.
So I know it's not like a me thing, but it's like, it's community.
No, I love that you say that, because I think oftentimes we forget it's our village that literally is our, personal board of advisors, our best advocates, our champions. Like, so many decisions are made when we're not in the room. And so when we have, like, a community that actually, like, builds us up and lifts us up, I think that's, like, priceless. It's hard to find, right? It's hard to maintain too, because it's like everyone's so busy. But the fact that, like, your community has, like, stood by you and kind of helped you make these very monumental, impactful things. It's incredible. It's inspiring.
Yeah. And it's not automatic. Like Lynn in particular, we've had a journey because Lynn is a lawyer. She's very risk averse, and she believes in the blueprint. And I appreciate that about her. But when I, pivoted, she didn't understand it. And she said it. She was very communicative and vocal about the fact that she did not understand what I was doing. There was no blueprint for what I was trying to do.
Yeah. That's the interesting part. Like, but how do you do it without a blueprint?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I mean, I'm still trying to I'm still finding my way.
Right.
But the fact that she was honest with me, I knew came from a place of love. And she continues to be honest with me and is now one of my biggest supporters in this world. So it's like,
that's huge.
And to be fair, like, I am so blessed because I know a lot of people don't have what I have. Like, my sister is my cinematographer. She's my DP. What? She graduated from USC with her master's in cinematography. She is DP for some of the most incredible projects. She just did a project with Alicia Keys last year that premiered at Tribeca. What? She's premiering a project this year with Serena Williams at Tribeca Film Festival. And
shout out to sister.
Yeah, and she DP'd my second project, which won our second Emmy.
Oh my gosh, your mother must be like, oh yeah, those came from me. Thank you for me. Thank you very much.
It took her a second to come around, but
Yeah.
she sees it now. But it took her she didn't understand. For the longest, she'd be like, so when are you going to go back and be a lawyer?
Right. Oh, I can relate to that. I mean, oh my gosh. I was a theater minor and my mother was like, why? Like I was in plays in college. She's just like, I don't understand this. Can you just tell me more about like your policy classes, your public policy and rhetoric? I was just like, okay, Mom, but this is also my passion.
Yeah.
But yeah, so tell me a little bit more about what advice would you give for multi-hyphenates? Because I feel like you're someone that you just admitted that you're still trying to figure it out, but I feel like you're doing it and you're doing it seamlessly. And I'm sure it's like it takes the hindsight of 2020, right? Like at the time you probably didn't think you were doing all of this. But what tips would you say like helped you? You said like obviously the community is huge.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're also kind of resilient. Like you have a sort of like stamina, personality that's like, I'm going to get it done no matter what. Mm-hmm. What else would you say like people need?
I would say number one is love for what you do.
I love that. Mm-hmm.
Like I genuinely love this. Like I used to be in law school and people would be debating constitutional law in the hallways and I'd be like, well, nerds,
right?
These geeks. And now I'm the person who like literally can't stop talking about different shows that I've seen and different playwrights and things and just books that I'm in love with and stories that I'm in love with. And I realized like that's the thing I'm a geek for, right? And then equally as important is I am constantly in conversation with God. Maybe more. Actually, what am I saying? It's definitely more important. Right. God talks to me every day. I love that. And people don't believe me, but then something will happen and they'll be like, oh my God. Like it just happened to me at a bar. Like Monday night, I went to go see a friend of mine in a show. Actually, two friends of mine in a show. Yeah. And I went with a friend to the bar next door. And I was like, because God talks to me every day. And right at that moment, this guy walks up to us and I recognize him, but I can't remember who it is. And I realized, oh my God, it's my agent. Stop! I just emailed with him so much, I forgot what he looks like.
I love that. Shout out to the
pandemic, bro. And he's such an amazing, incredible agent. Shout out Tom Markley. And he just happened to be there with a casting director. And introduced me, and it was a great time. It was a wonderful introduction. And as soon as he walked away, my friend looked at me and she was like, yeah, God does talk to you every day. I was like, every single day. Yeah. I am in a constant conversation with God and the universe. Wow. And I think we have to be willing to listen and be open to what the universe is telling us.
No, that's huge because I think there's so many voices that sometimes we don't sit and think about, wait, is this God? And if it is, like, we have to have the courage to listen and to, like, take the next step, right? Like, it's sometimes that's the hardest thing is taking that next step, I think.
Exactly.
But, wow, talk about right place, right time, meant to be. I'm just like, oh, I just got chills. I'm like, can you tell me a little bit about your creative process? Because you mentioned casting director, right? Like that's huge to have relationships with casting directors. What's your process when you're writing a poem or when you're preparing for a role?
It's funny. I actually just got an audition.
Congrats.
And thank you. And I was like looking at the lines before I got here. Yeah. And as you know, I'm currently in a play.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So I don't know when this is going to air, but if it's still up and running, Two Stop at the Atwater Village at Ensemble Studio Theater.
Yes. And how long is this running?
It's running until June 9th.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Your episode will definitely.
There's a lot of preparation. My process. Okay. So with writing, it's a little different, and particularly with poetry, because I've been writing poetry for over 2 decades. Wow. With spoken word, it's really a matter of, and now I get asked to write more often. So oftentimes it'll be like to assignment. Okay. But it's a lot of research and reading and pouring into, and I guess the same thing is true for acting, right? Like you have to have a well to draw from. So a lot of my process is I love to read. I love to take in stories. Like podcasts like LeVar Burton Reads, which I'm so sad is about to conclude.
Oh, no.
And constantly just pouring into and living life and saying yes and being open to new and interesting experiences.
Right.
And also during shows, I try not to drink
That's huge.
too much. I'm not going to say at all.
Right.
Too much.
Yeah.
And I also am very, because you have to be in touch with your instrument, right? And so this is my instrument.
Right.
From a writing perspective and also from an acting perspective. And so I try as much as possible to take really good care of my body so that when it feels something, I know what it is, right?
That's huge. Okay.
It's not just about like, am I hungry? Am I not? It's bigger than that. It's, am I sad? Am I anxious? Which I often am.
Right. Me too.
And so going to the gym regularly, at least maybe 4 times a week, and trying to eat healthy. And I love food.
Me too.
And
doesn't love me though.
Listen.
Darn.
And yeah, just really, really, really like honoring what I've been given, right?
Yeah.
So just trying to take care of myself, which I used to not do. Like I used to work myself to the bone. I'm such a workaholic. It is my habit.
Yeah.
But like now really taking time to like mentally take care of myself as well.
Love that.
Going to therapy.
Yes.
So I've been going to therapy. I was going once a week. Now I'm going every other week. And also reading a ton of books about the way our brains work, the way our spirits work, the way our emotions work.
Yes.
Because I think too often it's like we don't really dig into that.
Right.
Why do we do the things that we do? Why are we the way that we are?
Right.
And the greater understanding I can have of myself, the more self-awareness I can build, the more compassion and empathy I can have for the people around me and also for the characters that I'm creating and building and producing. So
wow. Oh my gosh, you gave me chills. That is like, I feel like this was meant to be. I mean, you remind me so much of my husband. Like when I'm asking him, like he's definitely all about like taking care of self from the inside out. And I'm just like, I love that you mentioned that because I think it's oftentimes overlooked. Like being a workaholic, I admit, I am too, but it's overrated. Like that's not healthy. That's not going to get us to the next season, right? It's just like we have to take care of ourselves so that we can be here and make the impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, but okay. So we mentioned earlier that you co-starred in Blue Bloods and also the other two. Can you tell me about those experiences and also, how have they shaped your career?
So I booked those 2 things actually during the pandemic.
That's crazy. Wow.
And I was in acting conservatory at the time at the Atlantic Theater Company, and we were on Zoom. So the funny part is you're not actually supposed to work while you're in acting school. But because we were in the pandemic and because everything was over Zoom, I had all of this time and freedom to kind of like weasel my way out of that,
Love that, yeah.
You got to make the system work for you.
Yes,
and I, to a certain extent, am a little bit of not a rule breaker, but a rule bender. And so
most good lawyers are.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why we study the law.
And so I really made an effort to try to I found a manager while I was in acting school.
Oh,
the
wow.
manager was incredible at submitting me, and Compass Arts, I will always be grateful to them.
Wow.
And I booked those 2 roles while I was in school. And I went, and it was so much fun.
Oh
I remember
gosh.
the other 2, my director was an Asian woman, and I was like, wow, this is really cool.
That
yeah.
is cool.
And it was just, I mean, honestly, the people you meet on set are so wonderful. And yeah, I literally have no complaints. How it shaped my career, it definitely helps to have experience on your resumes.
Right.
Shortly after that, I was actually just giving someone this advice yesterday. I got selected for this Warner Media Talent Spotlight program, which is essentially a showcase I believe there were 21,000 applicants, 11,000 auditions, 2,000 callbacks, and then 20 people were selected.
What?
And our 20-person cohort is the only Warner Media talent cohort. They have directing programs, they have animation programs, but we were the only acting program they had.
Oh my god!
The only acting showcase that they had.
Oh my god!
Because Discovery bought them right, like in the middle of our showcase.
Oh wow!
And so we are such a tight knit group.
Love that.
And we still are very much connected. I was actually just helping my one friend Michael Oloyede with an audition yesterday.
Oh my god!
2 days ago. And Benny Wayne Sullivan is actually the actor who I was visiting his improv show on Monday when I ran into my agent.
Oh my
god!
So
I'm very connected with my cohort. But wait, how did I get onto that? So what was the question?
I know. I was like, what was the question? So I was talking about kind of like your career highlights. So how those experiences shape your career.
So I was telling someone that, so coming out of the Warner Media showcase, I got another manager. I got an LA manager at Throughline. And we had one point of contention, which is ultimately what severed the relationship, which was that she didn't want to submit me for co-stars.
What?
And
that's interesting.
Because she really only wanted me to be going out for series regular roles, which I totally appreciate and understand. And I really appreciate that they believed in me that much. But I also really strongly feel like I want to do all the work. Like, you know, and for me, I'm like, there are no small roles, you know?
Right. It's the craft.
And so I still get very excited about going out for co-star and guest star roles. And so I have representation now who I love. Yay. We already talked about Tom, but I also have Rena Patton, who I am obsessed with. And they both are really supportive in making sure that they just find roles that are good for me.
Right.
And that are good for building and developing my career. So I want to do more roles like that, and I'm auditioning for those types of roles. And in fact, I just had a guest star audition for a new Mara Bakakil show, and I didn't book it.
Okay.
But they asked me back to audition for a series regular role, and I didn't book that either. But the fact that they called me back in, and actually that casting office is the one who just brought me back in for an audition that I have an audition for now. So it's like. And that was my first time auditioning for that casting office. Wow. So I really do believe in, you know, just
doing the work.
Just doing the work.
I love
That's really
that.
it.
Yeah, you show up. I mean, because hey, I have friends that are actors, and I'm just like, it takes a special person because there's so much rejection, although there's so much celebration, right? It's like the yin and yang, and you're just like, I don't know how my spirit can handle the rejection. I'm just like such a sensitive one. I'm like, what? You didn't like me? But I just love that you're just like, no, I'm going to show up and I'm going to keep going. And like you said, it's like, it may not be that role, but now you're on their radar, and now they'll remember you when it's like the perfect role for you.
And that was the win.
Yeah.
That was the win.
Yeah. That's
so,
oh my gosh. No, that's huge. Wow. So can you tell me, how has your definition of success changed, or how would you define it? Because you have such a multifaceted life. You could just be like, I'm good, I'm retired, I've done everything. You've like lived out all of your dreams. I don't know if they're all of them, but they're majority of your dreams, right? It's just like, that's huge that you've done something in every arena that you've wanted to so far. So how would you define success, and has it evolved over time?
I think success is a thing. Well, it's so funny. I'm obsessed with Larry Wilmore, and people always ask him, like, you know, how do you define success, or when did you feel like you had made it?
Right.
And he was like, the moment I started working in the entertainment industry, I'd made it.
Wow.
That was success for me, because it's like, this is what I want to do, and I'm doing it.
100%.
And I very much identify with that. Like, first of all, I didn't grow up knowing anybody in the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
It didn't feel tangible to me. It didn't feel like something I was allowed to go out and reach. Right. You know, like, And I think that is true for a lot of people. It's like sometimes you feel like this is a thing I'm not allowed to pursue. And at some point, I guess I gave myself permission, or maybe I felt like God gave me permission.
Yeah.
And just doing it, just being able to show up and do this thing that I love. Is the success. Getting an audition, that's the success.
Huge.
I feel successful already because I am building a career.
I love that.
And while this doesn't look like what other people view as successful, it doesn't matter.
Right. Because
I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm like genuinely happy doing what I love. I'm a world's difference in tax brackets from where I was, years ago. But honestly, I wouldn't trade it. Like that money doesn't matter to me because that money came and it left.
Yeah.
Trust me, it left.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
But the experiences and the joy that I get to have just doing this work and experiencing the highs and lows of it.
I love that.
It makes me feel more alive than I ever have before. And so.
Yeah, you can tell it's feeding your soul. Like the passion that you do. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it almost make me I'm like, why did I stop this? Maybe I should have continued my theater minor.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And I just look at you and I'm just like, okay, I am like saluting you from afar. But how would you say, especially like you mentioned your immigrant mother and shout out to mom. I'm just wondering, like, as someone who is both Korean and African American, how it's like your identity, like who you are as a person growing up, like your two worlds combining, and how does that affect like the roles you think you're cast in or thought of? Do you feel like that plays a role in it, or you're like, no, guys, I can be anything because I'm a blend of so many things, you know?
Both.
Okay.
Both, absolutely. Okay. I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, I am Black.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I am Korean.
Yeah.
And I am never going to be able to walk into a room and be one or the other. And at the same time, I can still tell a story. And both of my identities can feed into that story. So, for example, I mean, historically, most of the roles I get cast for they're seeking Black actors, right? Or ethnically ambiguous, or it doesn't matter, right? Right. Almost never do I get cast for a role that's specifically for someone who is Asian, just Asian, right? Okay. But like, I mean, what can I say? I'm from Newark. Yeah. I grew up with my Black daddy. I grew up with my Black grandma. Right. Love that. And I grew up with my Korean mom and my Korean stepdad, and all of those things are a part of who I am. Right. And I've lived in so many different worlds that I think, for me, it's like, whether or not I get the audition is not within my control. Right. Whether or not someone looks at my photo and says, "Oh, they can't play this role. Oh, they're not built for it." That's not within my control. Right. What is within my control is when I do get that audition, and also making sure that I have representation that understands that and that can advocate for me. Yeah. And that's what I have right now. Oh, the amount of times Rena has looked at a casting call and seen that they were looking for a white woman has been like, no, you should cast a Black woman, and actually you should look at my client for this. And they've been like, okay, yeah, send her stuff. Yes. Let her audition. Oh my gosh. That I have that. Yeah. And so I'm really grateful and that I have a team. I'm in control of that, right? Like that I have a team that like understands me and believes in my talent and believes in my storytelling capabilities. And simultaneously, I am in control of when I get an audition, how do I make it me? Yes. How do I make it mine? How do I make the character fit me versus me trying to fit into a character that doesn't even exist, right? And so that's what I really, really focus on. I've really learned over the past, this year in particular, I've learned to let go of trying to fit some person's perceived stereotype of a character and just be who I am as a character. Like, what does the character sound like when I do it?
Right.
Who is the character when I'm confronted with these realities? And so that's how I deal with that. But I've had potential reps ask me like, what do you usually go out for? I'm just trying to figure out how to market you.
What?
Like, do you ever get seen for Asian roles, or like, how does that work? Or, I've had those kinds of questions. I've had there's been a lot of conversation about my hair. There's been a lot of, I had a former agent who was like, yeah, I need headshots. Give me Niecy Nash meets Angela Bassett. And I'm like,
that's a real statement.
That's a real statement.
Oh my gosh.
And when I delivered it, they were like, you know what? Why don't you go on Zoe Saldana's page and give me something like that?
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So.
That's the frustration. I think it's like the typecasting that I'm like, oh my gosh, they would make me respond.
But that was like my own rep at the time. So it's it became clear to me. I was like, oh, you don't know what to do with me.
Right.
You don't see me.
Mm-hmm.
So from then, that's actually what catapulted me into trying to figure out like, well, who am I?
Right.
Because I need to be able to see myself before anybody else can see me.
Woo! That's a word right there. It's your artistry is your advocacy, because you're just already just being you. You're like, I'm going to let you know who I am.
Exactly.
I don't know, how much time do I have? Do I have time for another big question? Because oh, perfect. Because I just want to know, you talk about the team that you have now. How did you go about finding the right team? Because I think, a lot of the audience is like, okay, it seems like you found the dream team now, and it's hard, right? It's hard to find people that actually see you for you, understand your talents, and can advocate for you and tell them like, hey, no, you need to meet with her. So like, how do you go about building the right team?
Somebody was just asking me this question yesterday, actually.
It's definitely hard.
Because I think it's about chemistry too, right? And to be fair to my previous teams, like, I am so grateful to all of them.
Right.
Like, I love my former manager,
I love that.
Despite the falling out that we had, because at the end of the day, like, they were what I needed at that moment.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I love all of my former managers, honestly. They were exactly what I needed at that moment. And aside from the one agent who told me to get those headshots, I've honestly had really, really blessed and beautiful experiences with all of my managers and my agents. How I go about finding them, honestly, God puts them in I just do the work.
I just
do the work.
Right.
That's it. And I keep doing the work, and I keep putting myself out there. And a lot of stuff doesn't pan out, but every now and then something pans out and something shines through, and that something will garner the attention of whoever needed to see it at that moment. And then I end up connecting with that person, and I end up making magic with that person. Like, my previous manager is the reason I did my first feature film called Break.
Oh, congrats.
And which was just released maybe 2 weeks ago, nationwide and in Canada. And I'm so grateful for that project. It was one of the best experiences of my life.
I love that.
And it's going to be streaming on Amazon on June 11th, and is also available for pre-order on Apple. On Apple
shout
TV.
out both Amazon.
I think. Yeah, so that manager I found because I did the Warner Media Showcase. The manager before that I found because I met someone who was an actor, who was a lawyer turned actor, and I asked him who his manager was, and he told me, and I just continued connecting with him and doing the work, and he was like, I'd be open to sharing this with my manager. Wow. And I was like, great. And that's how I ended up getting my first manager. My second manager I got coming out of acting school, I had cold, what is it? It was a cold call. Yeah. I had cold submitted to for Color Girls on Broadway. Oh. And I kept getting called back for different, I auditioned for Lady in Red, didn't get it, but I got called back for Lady in Yellow. And then I didn't know this to be true, but I was like, I think Lady in Red must have got pregnant, and it turns out she did. Because then they called me back for Lady in Red, and the person I ended up signing with actually I think represented the girl who got the role, but she helped me get my first one-woman show coming out of acting school. So as soon as I finished the Warner Media Showcase, I flew back to New York, and I did a one-woman show. And
is this her story? Is that the one?
No, her story is a spoken word program that I did, a tour that I did for several years.
Okay,
probably like 10 years with K.O. Carl Charles, who was also a deaf poet. And he created her story because he wanted to give other poets a platform to do their work and to build a career in poetry like he did. And so. Yeah, and I got that because someone recommended me because I was just out doing the work, just doing spoken word. And that's why I'm such a believer in just, keep putting yourself out there, keep doing the work.
Yeah.
Show people that you can do the thing that they want you so desperately to do.
Yeah, and it's like stop acting out of fear-based. Like I think people are so afraid to put themselves out there because they're like, oh, how will they receive me? Or they're scared of the rejection. But it just sounds like, just doing it for one, that's success. Like you just did it. And then hopefully people will recognize the talent, right?
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Wow, I feel like I could ask some more stuff because I'm just like, this is exciting. So what would you say, I guess to sum it up, what would you say is like the biggest challenge and most rewarding moment in your journey so far?
The biggest challenge was actually doing it. So to your point, like I'm talking a lot of smack right now, but the truth of the matter is that when I first pivoted, it took me about a year to even say I was an actor.
Wow.
And it took me many more years. I'm not even sure I'm completely broken of the habit, but it's still hard for me to say I'm an actor and not also say that I'm a lawyer.
Wow.
Because the way that people look at you when you say you're an actor, their eyes kind of glaze over. They're like, oh, okay. Because if they don't recognize you, if you're not a household name, if you're not on their favorite television show or in their favorite movie, they think that you're not successful, right? You're not their version of success. And so a lot of times, because I love the validity, the credibility that comes from the validation that I get from saying, oh, I'm a lawyer. Oh,
right.
You're a lawyer. You've accomplished something. You're smart. It's like, yeah. And I was all those things as an actor too.
Right.
And so it took me a long time to say I was an actor, even when that was the only thing that I was doing.
Right.
And it took me even longer time to not figure out ways to insert that I'm also a lawyer, just to, get that validation because this job is hard.
It's hard.
And people don't have a lot of respect for it.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I couldn't do it. So I'm like, the people who are judging, it's like, can you do this? If not, then shut up. No. So what are some, like, what's your dream role? What's some of the projects that you're like, okay, I want to pursue this next. Like, I want to explore.
Honestly, I really, now that the strike is over, I absolutely want to do more television, more film. I had so much fun shooting Break. And I mean, I love theater. I mean, obviously, again, 2-stop at Atwater Village right now.
Yes.
But I'm also considering directing.
Really?
Specifically theater directing.
Love
not
that.
so much television and film yet.
Okay.
But I love theater. If I'm not in a show, I'm at a show.
Yeah.
And so I just watch a lot of theater. I'm so passionate about it. And I love working with other creatives. And I think directing would be really cool. So I'm actually talking to one of my past directors about coming and assistant directing a show with him this fall.
I love that.
But I'm still, I'm still auditioning for television and film.
Yes.
And honestly, like Star Trek, I'm a Trekkie.
Really?
And so I would, that was like kind of the thing for that. When I think about my dad, it's like something that it was a way that we connected and bonded.
Oh, I love
and so there's something special about Star Trek for me,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm getting teary-eyed.
I know. The reboot for Star Trek, they need to consider you. Love that.
Sorry for the listeners. That was a really loud laugh. It was very aggressive.
No.
But yeah, I would love to work on Star Trek or anything sci-fi, honestly. I love history. I love stories that are born out of history. And I love, oh my God, this past season of them, blew my socks off. But honestly, yeah, just I love all stories. So I'm not,
Seriously.
there is not one thing. And this is going to sound so corny, but I would love to play a lawyer on TV.
Really? Oh my gosh. Should she be part of the remake of The Suits? Like your Billy would be the vibes.
Yeah,
A real lawyer playing a lawyer. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That would be that actually would be good because you're like, this doesn't take much. I actually know what's going on here.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we've made it to the lightning round.
Okay.
And this is just 5 quick questions. And you just have 1 to 5 word responses. Like that's what we ask our guests.
Okay.
So whatever comes to mind. So my passion in the arts and entertainment comes from
God.
Oh, I mean, that makes sense. I should have
And my
guessed it.
parents, but God.
And your parents were supportive, right? Like,
No.
Okay.
But my dad is the one who introduced me to theater. Originally, I used to go to
that.
Crossroads Theater in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Mm.
And my dad has always kind of had like a little artistic like flair, whether he realizes it or not. I wish he would invest in that part of himself.
Yeah.
And my mother, like I said, was like, I don't understand.
Right,
But she
of course.
still is like my biggest supporter. I could not do what I do without my mom's support. My mom is there for me in a million myriads of ways, in ways she knows and in ways she doesn't. And so yeah, I couldn't do this work without them.
Oh, well, shout out to your parents. Having it all means to me what?
Having it, oh well, for me right now, because I'm getting older, is having a husband and children.
Okay. Oh,
in addition
I
to
love
my
that.
career.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Another role of wife and mother.
Yeah.
A fun fact about me that you may not know.
A fun fact about me that you may not know. Ooh, that is hard.
Isn't that hard?
Because I'm like, what's fun?
So many things. I'm like,
Oh man, a fun fact about me that you may not know is that I don't know, girl.
I mean, you shared that you were a truckie. You shared that you were a teacher teaching constitutional law. I'm sorry, I love you, but con law was like my least favorite.
Con law was also my least favorite, but teaching it to high school students is fun.
Oh, that sounds fun.
No, fun fact that you. I don't know, man. I mean, I'm fun.
Yeah, you sound fun. I mean, I feel like I could just talk to you for hours.
Oh well, I will say this.
Yeah.
There were people who would disagree with me, but that's because they're grown men. Yes, a fun fact about me is I can drink most people under the table. I learned to drink from my Korean stepdad, who used to teach me how to drink like wine, whiskey, soju, and beer all in the same night. Now, I have calmed down considerably since those years. But yeah, and I used to be a club girl. I used to be in these streets at the clubs.
I can only imagine in New
the
York.
streets, not the sheets. So.
Hello. Distinction. I love that. Doing more. What? What do you want to do more?
Television and film. I want to do more television and film.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then last but not least, how was your experience on this podcast?
Oh my God, so good. So amazing.
Yay.
So easy. I was nervous, but I'm really grateful. You're such an incredible host.
Oh my God, you're such an incredible guest. I was like, you're basically doing all the work for me. You just answered all my questions. I was like, I don't even have to go through some of these questions because she gave me the answers. But no, this was so great. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. It's literally been my pleasure. Yeah. You did all the things. You were inspiring. You were yourself. And you kept it real because that whole parents thing, I was like, oh yeah, my parents did not support any of that either. Mm. I don't even know if they've even listened to this podcast yet. I need to go talk to them. But any final thoughts, any final words? Where can the audience go support you? Any social handles you want to share? Whatever. The floor is yours.
You can find me on Instagram at Suzen, SUZEN
Love that.
_ Baraka, BARAKA. I do not have a TikTok because I don't have a TikTok. But I do have a website, which is www.suzenbaraka.com.
I love it. And we did not even talk about the fact that your last name, I mean, during Barack Obama's presidency, you must have been like, okay, guys, I get the jokes.
And also being a poet from Newark, New Jersey, I also get it a lot. But I was actually, okay, so this is a fun fact. I was actually born Susan Shack.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And my father, after I was born, was like, I don't want my children to have this slave name.
Oh,
And so his nickname that the brothers in Newark gave him was Baraka. And so he decided to make that our family surname. And so my mentor and second mother, Karimu F. Hill Harvey, changed my last name to Baraka.
Wow.
And that's how I got the name Suzen Baraka.
Wow. And it just fits you so well. I can't even imagine Susan Jack. I don't know. Susan Baraka fits you. Oh.
Thank you. Oh, and one more thing.
Yeah.
Please go support my sister, Ayana Baraka, Ayana, also known as IC Flicks on Instagram. I'm her biggest fan, so.
I love that. Sisters. I mean, you guys are powerhouses. I love the sister bond. Me and my sister are definitely supportive, but we're not as fun as you guys. I feel like you guys are doing some fun things with cinematography, poetry. I love it. But yeah. I guess that's all our time for today. So this is London signing off. I hope you guys were equally inspired by today's conversation. And be sure to tune in next week where we have another special guest showing us how cool it is to do more than one thing and effortlessly. I don't know how she does it. But after all, we're so much more, guys. All right. Toodles.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was